Hello, I'm Daniel, and welcome to my YouTube channel. We here at the channel are continuing in our series of videos with respect to inspiration, information, education, guidance, and advice. And I'm reminded of the verse in the book of Numbers, chapter 23-21. This is when Balaam is supposedly cursing the Jewish people, but it turns out to be a bracha. It turns out to be a blessing, words of praise. And he says a very interesting thing. This is in Exodus 23:21. He perceived no iniquity in Jacob and saw no perversity in Israel. He looked at the Jewish people, he couldn't find a fault. And I'm reminded of two stories, Hasidic stories, with respect to people who did find fault with the Jewish people. And the response to these criticism. One involves the holy Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. He once spent Shabbos in a city that had a large group of his followers, and there was a traveling darshan, a lecturer, someone who would give sermons, usually on ethical matters. And the Baal Shem Tov, who was sympathetic and empathetic to most people, he saw this, heard that this traveling lecturer, preacher, was going to be in town, and he wanted to give him a large audience. So the Baal Shem Tov attended the drasha, the sermon, the lecture. And of course, all the Baal Shem Tov's followers in the town also came to listen to the darshan, to listen to the lecture. So the lecturer, the preacher, gets in front of the lectern, the stender, and he speaks penetrating words of inspiration. He laced his sermon, as it were, however, with harsh criticism for the crowd, for the very people assembled in front of him. For their lack of mitzvahs, their lack of religious observance, their lack of Torah study, their flimsy attendance at minyanim, at synagogue services, their diminished yiras shamayim, their fear of heaven. The Baal Shem Tov, who was sitting there, heard these onslaught of invectives leveled at the community, as many of whom were his own followers. So he stood and proceeded to leave the room. Not surprisingly, when his followers, when his Hasidim saw that the Baal Shem Tov was leaving, they too, one by one, got up, walked out. And eventually there was basically no one left to hear the rest of the sermon, the rest of the critique. He was talking to an empty room. After Shabbos, the lecturer, the darshan, comes to the home where the Baal Shem Tov was staying, and he starts complaining to the Baal Shem Tov. Said, everybody left the lecture. I was talking to an empty room, talking to the four walls. He couldn't complete the drasha. I don't even know if I'm going to get it paid. Hearing this, the Baal Shem Tov arises from his chair, and with tears streaming down his face, he turned to the rabbi, turned to the lecturer, and said, "You permitted yourself to criticize Jews in public. I would like you to know that when a Jew toils throughout the day, going to the market, earning what few pennies he can, to get some sort of livelihood, some sort of parnasa for him and his family, his wife, his children. And in the evening, after a full day of back-breaking labor, which often proves unsuccessful in yielding a decent financial return, just barely makes it to shul, to the synagogue in time for a minyan. His prayer, the prayer of that poor man, that poor simple Jew, arouses a tumult in heaven. The entire heavenly tribunal gathers together around the throne of God, and they say, "Who is like your nation, Israel? And now you, a mere creature of flesh and blood, of skin and bones, you have the audacity, the chutzpah, to censor these fine people?" It's easy to criticize. It's all too easy to mock and ridicule, God forbid, in public. It's a very serious offense. We are to reprimand people, of course. If you see someone doing something wrong, you have an obligation to point it out to him, but how you do it is very important. You cannot shame someone. We cannot embarrass someone. It's a very, very serious offense. We'll get into it in later lectures and later videos, just how seriously our sages view this, embarrassing, humiliating someone in public. We're going to be doing more videos along these lines. Please come back. Please watch. Please learn. I hope you're finding them of some inspiration. And until next time, I'm Daniel, and thank you too much.